Welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said. We are so excited today to be talking to Tamika Thompson, who is the author of Salamander Justice, Unshod, Cackling, and Naked, a really awesome short story collection, and the upcoming, which is one of our 2026, probably one of our most anticipated books that will be coming out, The Curse of Hester Gardens. Welcome, Tamika.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and so we met at StokerCon, and it's funny because it's like we kind of like Rebecca and I met you like separately
Yeah.
because I went to your reading and she met you like right before the big
Signing.
giant signing.
Mhm.
And we were both like, "Hey, I want to go get this person's book. Like, I really like." And she said the same thing, and we were talking about the same person, and it was you. So
Yes.
that was really
Yes.
funny.
How about that? StokerCon is just like, I feel like that sums up StokerCon, right? It's just like it is bringing together everyone. Is You just bump into so many people
Yeah.
coming and going. If you saw the reading, that means you saw Clay. I mean, a sight to behold. I felt so like after that I got to see him read his piece, was just his nominated piece. I just was, I don't know, blown away. So if you saw me after that, I might have still been like in the fog.
Oh, I love that. It was very much a performance, that's for sure. And, I would say that if were not emotionally affected by that, then you need to check your pulse, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I loved, not to dive right in here, but, you read from your short story collection. And I did not realize until had the collection and was reading that story that it was not the end of the story where you ended in your reading. And I was very happy about that because when you finish, I was like, what's next? So thankfully that story didn't end, and I want to talk about that one in detail a little bit later. But your reading was so good, and definitely as soon as I heard that, and sort of you talked a little bit about in the Q&A afterwards how you sort of had a journalism beginning in your writing and in studies and stuff like that, and how that kind of informs your writing is something that I'm very interested in talking
But if
about as
but if
well.
I remember correctly, you were an actress too, correct?
Yes, I've taken a very circuitous path to my current horror writing career, and I think I was kinda touching on some of that in the Q&A,
Hmm.
but I started off. I grew up in Detroit, and Detroit at the time was at the height of the crack epidemic.
Hmm.
It it was a high crime neighborhood, and there was just a lot of peril and gun violence. And at the same time, my family was really big on horror. And that was
Yeah.
kind of how I got started was, watching horror movies as young as 4 and dealing with the trauma of living in a high crime neighborhood while at the same time going to Catholic school in a nearby suburb and also having a career as a model and actress, and my mother also put me in pageants when I was young. So that's why I think the path was so circuitous, is because it was
Hmm.
kind of a mishmash of so many different worlds and experiences at such a young age. And horror, I think, was the thing that kind of carried me through everything.
Okay. Like a
Yeah,
comfort.
it was like a horror for me was always a place where I was in preparation for the perils of life and the perils of
Wow.
living in America as a marginalized person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I there is just kind of for African American people in particular, we're walking around, we feel a lot of times like we're walking around with a target on our back, and
Uh-huh.
we always have to kind of be ready. And I feel like watching horror and absorbing horror from such a young age made me less fearful of the real life terror that was going on around me, because I was thinking through, okay, how am I going to prepare? Where are the exits? What weapons can I use if I ever need to? And it kind of was in a way, it was a preparation, but also was like a coping mechanism. I think
Mm.
you know, uh, how do I not be afraid?
Yeah.
How, and there was a lot to be afraid of. And so
Yeah.
I that kind of propelled me to all of the other places that I went in life, to
Mhm.
journalism and to the writing career, was that sort of interesting and varied start.
That's really interesting because, we talked to, I don't know if you know Alyssa Alessi, who,
Yes!
okay. So she's from Boston. And when we talked to her, she had a very similar thing that, a lot of people have different sort of relationships with horror. And she said real life was the real horror. Horror as a genre in the movies and shows and books were almost like her safe and calm and sort of like where she could
She
control
said she could
things.
kick ass.
Yeah, like she could see Buffy and see a girl kicking ass, and doing that kind of stuff. And that it sort of provided, that sort of almost calming space where she had control over and could see like good winning at the end, and, for you to say that it kind of you used it as preparation is really fascinating too.
Like, really makes me teary-eyed because, I mean, there's so many times that I check my privilege, but to know that, like, I'm just watching horror or reading it and I'm scared and it's not a reflection of my life and I don't have to control that. And like, it just will never be lost on me that some people had, whether experience with their race or they're, in such unsafe neighborhoods or such terrible things happening that horror was a comfort to them. And glad that it was there. It's just, to hear someone, and it's been multiple people that have shared that. And it's just, it never stops getting old to just like think that something that I think so many people kind of say is outcast or villainized. It's like, this was my comfort. This helped me stay, alive, afloat, empowered and control, whatever,
Mhm.
I'll let you fill in the adjectives, Tamika.
Yes, I listened to some of Alyssa's interview with you guys, and she was talking about the family aspect of it too,
Mhm.
which we identify with. Alyssa and I are sharing a table of contents in the Rack Volume 2, which is coming out.
Oh,
Awesome.
amazing.
I'm
So
Yeah,
really,
awesome.
really excited,
Tom
Tom
Getty.
D. And so I'm really excited. But yeah, so I listened to her and I really identified with that, particularly the family aspect. I think there was a part of my grandmother and my mother and even my father too that was their intention, to be real with me about the dangers in life, but also to kind of have fun with it because it wasn't,
Right.
it was fun to watch Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street
Mhm.
and talk about afterwards what we would have done, and they weren't doing that right. And why is she going down that hallway? Girl.
Oh, I know for sure that like I'm gonna fall. I mean, like I have no judgment on these people because I feel like or
Yeah.
that the nervous system like locks up and like I would be like I'd be the person they'd be like, "You dumb girl,
Yeah.
get up."
Yes, but
Do you feel like
yeah.
you were shown or that they picked specific sort of titles or subgenres that they watched with you, to sort of like specifically say like, okay, you might be in a position where you're getting chased or like this kind of thing is happening. So seeing that, do you think that like that they were kind of thinking about that with the titles, like you said, Halloween or something like that?
Whatever was popular at the
Okay.
time we're interested in,
Mm.
very different from the conversations they were having with me about my safety.
Yeah.
So, conversations that they had with me about my safety when I was young was, number 1, if there is an emergency, you are not allowed to call 911. You are
Yeah.
not allowed to call the police.
Okay, I would have messed that up. All
Hmm.
right.
Yeah. You need, like, we had certain family members that if something is happening, someone's after you, you're scared, something bad happens, you can call certain family members. If there was a medical emergency, we could call 911, but we had to say, like, as soon as we called 911, we had to say, this is a medical emergency so that they knew not to, sick the police on us.
Mm.
That's
So we
holy
had to be
shit.
careful about, being a girl and walking, alone in the
Yes.
neighborhood. And so there were some things in, I think, those horror movies that were lessons that, why is she alone? They would point out
Yeah.
to me, why is she walking alone?
Hmm.
And I think that there is a certain level of our society that has changed about that and has said, that we cannot blame the victim and we need to
Mhm.
stop victim blaming.
Oh my god, yeah.
My culture, when I was growing up, for African American people, we have to survive. And part of our survival is not making anything easy for anyone. Don't make it easy for the cop who pulls you over to shoot you. These are the steps that you need to take. They don't always work. Those steps don't always work. They
Yeah.
still shoot you, but this is what you need to do to make it not
Jesus.
be so easy. If you need to get to your car, like, this is what you need to carry with you. Don't walk alone. Go with like all the things that we say. To a certain extent, if it happens to you, you blame the victim. But at the same time, the parents felt that they were preparing us for the world that we were going into,
Yeah.
Right.
arming us with the information.
Real life horrors. I mean, just horrific. I listened to what you're saying and would I do anything different? Would I in that position if I was the parent? Like I wouldn't, and if I was the child of having to prepare for some of those things, like at what age do you start getting kind of told that you move from like an innocent, child to someone that you feel like, for lack of a better word, that you'd be, targeted or less likely to be believed or what age is that?
It starts pretty young and it comes in doses. And a lot of it I felt was situational. So when I
Mm.
was very young in my neighborhood, because it was a tough neighborhood, I had to also be tough. And so I remember, and I've told this story before, I had to have been like maybe 6, which is the age of my son right now. But there was a girl on my block who asked if she can borrow my bike, and she borrowed it, but then she didn't give it back. And I was really upset about that, and I went and I talked to my mother, and my mother was like, "You're gonna go get that bike back, and if you
Mhm.
don't go get the bike back, you're gonna have to deal with me. So do you wanna deal with me or do you wanna deal with her?" And I was afraid, and, I went to get the bike back, and my mother had to prepare me for the neighborhood that I lived in, and I could not be soft in the neighborhood that I lived in. My son is growing up in a pretty privileged neighborhood, and so the lessons are different. I
Okay.
am able to have a little more freedom about him, but that's because he's 6. That is gonna change when he's 14 and he is menacing looking to our predominantly white neighbors in our
Oh,
neighborhood. So it depends on the environment, it is situational. And so I think it brought me to political science when I was in college and to journalism for grad school because I was really trying to figure out what just happened to me
Yeah.
first 18 years of my life.
yeah.
I'm traumatized. Like, what does this all mean?
I just
And
feel like this
that's
is the
kind of
first
like,
time I've ever wanted to cry recording. Like, it takes a lot for me because I always like joke and say I'm medicated, but like I can feel it in my throat, in my eyes, and like I just appreciate you sharing it because it's like no one should have to experience that, but the fact that you have, and you know, I do have a degree in criminal justice and sociology, and I read these things, but hearing testimony of someone's lived life, it
Mhm.
feels very different. So yeah, you're the first person to make me cry on the show is like,
Yeah.
but that's what,
We'll put an asterisk on this
no, but it's where I
episode.
always, like, Adam, like I never considered myself to be a horror reader, but I was
Yeah.
always reading everything about race, class,
Mhm.
and sexuality and everything that dealt with, and I'm very passionate about, second chances and recidivism and just like everything that, uh just allowing, it's like a lot of times I think I talked about that with Alyssa. It's like the ascribed status and the achieved status in life. It's just like you can't control where you were born, Tamika. You can't control, neither could I, and you don't control the color of your skin, but you're still a human being, and yet you're subjected to some of these experiences that other people will never have. And just to have conversation like this, it just means everything.
yes.
I
I,
think
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I think it's interesting. I grew up in Washington, D.C. in the 90s, and, I think that at the time it was considered, we talked about it all the time, is on the news all the time, that it was the murder capital of the country, also just ravaged by the crack epidemic too. And, obviously I'm a white man. I was a white boy at the time. But even then it was very much, observing, because I grew up poor, in the city. And so I went to public school, all those kinds of things. And I took it very, seriously, especially as I got older. And it's kind of goes hand in hand with some of the things that you're saying, of being that buffer, because we would go into the store after school, and they would say only one student at a time, but I could go in anytime I wanted and it was fine, no matter who else was in the store.
Right.
And just those situations, or like the one day we didn't have school and I was with friends, Black and Hispanic friends, and the police came up and stopped us and just like were giving us such a hard time. Why aren't you in school? You're truant, all this kind of stuff. And, just positioning, even physically positioning myself between, the officer and my friends, and saying like, just kind of trying to settle it down to like, there is no school today. You can go check. Like, we're not doing anything. And it's not always going to work, like you said, like it still could escalate, and things could happen. But, just even on the side of saying like, I have to be conscious of understanding that my friends are in danger almost all the time when we're walking around just going to a movie or whatever it is, because they are considered a danger. It really does, even like secondhand, knowing I might not be in danger, it definitely creates like a trauma and a different lens on everything around you, that it affects you for the
because
rest
you
of your life.
because you're worried about your friends
Yeah, you're worried about your friends, but you're also just like, all of these figures that are supposed to, like, you
to
watch
be safe.
television, you watch all these kinds of things. These are the people that are supposed to uphold justice, all this kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And you're like, no, they're oftentimes the exact opposite of that. And like a sort of look at the world that I think is different from a lot of other people's.
Have said multiple times, and it's come from my research on gun violence and youth violence that led to my novel that's coming out, but also I think it shows up in some of my other short writing. Black people in this country and other marginalized people have always been living in a dystopia. And
Hmm.
Yeah.
the dystopia now has spread
Right.
to groups outside of just African American people, outside of, BIPOC, LGBTQIA plus, disabled, unhoused, incarcerated. Like we have so many groups that it has been okay for horrible things to happen to them.
Mm.
State violence, terror, of course, the marginalization, but the feeling that you live in a country that does not really want you there and really would rather you were dead. And what has happened, and I could see it coming as I was doing the research for the book, because the research actually started when I was still working as a journalist, is that gun violence that had been acceptable within our society was the precursor to what we have today.
Mm.
It was a wave, it was like one of the earlier waves, but it was acceptable. It was acceptable to have gun violence in DC, it was acceptable to have gun violence in Oakland, in Detroit, in Chicago, inner city. And so what slowly began happening over time is that that has spread to everyone. So has the dystopia. The dystopia has spread to everyone now. And we are seeing things in our country and quite frankly in the world that I think for many people, they are seeing it for the first time.
Mm.
And they are like, "What is going on? What is happening?" A video going viral of Charlie Kirk being shot to death, is unheard of, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
completely unheard of. It's like, how is this even a thing? How is this even occurring?
Yep.
And it has been occurring. It has been occurring, but it's been occurring in the communities that this country as a whole has not cared about. The
Right.
outrage that we see over Jimmy Kimmel being removed from television is not parallel to the outrage that we have over the children of Israel and Gaza, experiencing a lot of the same thing that Black children and brown children have experienced in this country. The terror, the violence, the peril, the fact that your house can be, just completely devastated. Your family members killed. Just go out in the street and you may not come back. We have
Yeah.
accepted this, I think, societally, and so now that we've said it's okay for those groups, it's now become okay for everyone.
Mm.
And we're at a place now where we have to figure out, who are we? Who do we wanna be? Do we wanna continue to live like this?
Mhm. Mhm. I feel like I've been thinking a lot about just like the human horrors and why some things just hit us so hard and personal, and then other things for other people it doesn't hit at all. There's that phenomenon, like if you're out in the streets and you see, someone getting attacked or whatever, you assume like someone else will help, someone else will fix it, and you just kind of like let it happen. But, like I distinctly remember, when my TikTok feed was giving me all these videos of these people just talking about, where they were at in Palestine, and, I can hear these things happening and just like the suffering, and there were people. I mean, I was like just an absolute wreck of like, I never thought I was going to meet people like this. Are these people alive still? Like what happened? And it's just, um, for other people, it's like, oh, well, that's just, a school in another state, or that's just, some kid, or just some whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I come back to this thought that neurotypicals have less empathy than neurodivergents. And I just feel like that's where a big part of it, like, and I bet like if we polled people within the horror community, I bet a lot of them are neurodivergent versus neurotypical, and just being more willing to express and share things. And I think that we've said this a few times, that horror just shows the realities. It absolutely doesn't glamorize anything. And really, any other genre is really like looking at things through like the perfect capitalistic lens. Not always, but a lot of times, of succinct plot, happy ending, this and that. And it's like horror doesn't play with that. It says, no, we're going to look at all the ugly, messy things. And, I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, the As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. That's
No.
all like currently with the Syrian things that are happening. I just read The Blueprint by Gianna Rashad, and like it takes like a dystopian look on, like almost like there's this algorithm that's given to Black women of like who they have to marry and who they have to produce. But basically the author found this book of all these records of Black women being forced to produce babies, and that's what she wrote the book off of. And it's like, I don't know that that's considered a horror book, but as I was reading it, and then after I got to the author's note at the end, I'm like, oh my God, and I feel like some of these things need to have more of a horror label on them, because the human horrors are way, way, way worse than really any boogeyman that I could cook up.
Yes, agreed. And I think it is no coincidence that I went from journalism into, writing horror. The horror had always been there, but it wasn't until I went to journalism that I started writing, that I was like, you know, I think that this is a vehicle for some of these characters, some of this information to get out
Yeah.
there. I think it's no surprise. The novel that I have coming out, The Curse of Hester Gardens, is dedicated to my uncle, my maternal uncle, who was shot to death when I was very young. And one of my earliest memories in life is the cloud that hung over my family from the loss of
Mm.
my uncle. I think that is there's something about that is very American
Right.
to me,
Yeah.
that your family it's so easy for your family to be touched by gun violence. And I'm not anti-gun either.
Right.
My father grew up on a farm in Alabama, and he was he fished and he hunted, and my family is really big on guns, and they know how to shoot them, and, they use their guns for sport, and I used to help my father, when he would field dress the rabbits and bring them back, and I would help him, like, prep them and cook them, and, I have a certain respect for that.
Yeah.
And for, the sport of it and the fact that it is embedded in in the Constitution. I just don't think that American children should be sport. And
Right.
so when we transition to school shootings or mass shootings or so-called gang shootings, I think that that's where we really need to take a look at what kind of country do we wanna have.
Right. And I think that, one thing that I feel really, privileged in a way is that when, growing up, going to DC public schools, 80 to 90% or more of my teachers were Black women. And the books that we read, I look at, everyone else, things that they read. We read, Gordon Parks, and we read Native Son in high school. And we read, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings in middle school and things like that. And so when people say, like, oh man, what's changed in America? And I was like, to me, I'm like, nothing, because I've read and seen these things, and then as I went into, my further studies in college and stuff, reading W.B. Du Bois and reading Ida B. Wells, I'm like, this is all the same story that we're just repeating over and over again. But like you said, the people being affected, that's the only thing that's growing wider. The actions that are happening historically, have been worse at times, you know what I mean? So I think that it's just really, I think that what you say there is really interesting, because people don't realize that to think that what's happening right now is unprecedented is privileged in it of itself.
Well, it's funny. I was going to say that you had asked me, okay, because I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and you had said to me, like, well, how long do they play Christmas music here? And I was like, I don't know, it's something like 60 days, or, they start like right after.
Halloween,
Yeah. And you're like, and I was like, why? Like, how long did they play Christmas music where you live? And he was like, just for Christmas Eve.
like on the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it's like, okay, like, and then he was like, so did you guys sing the Black National Anthem? Like, and I was like, I don't, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
Like, I felt so stupid. Not stupid, just ignorant,
Yeah.
just uncultured, untouched. We grew up 90 miles apart and just had completely different. And I always want to know and I always want to learn, but it's like, that helped me because in a previous job, I got the opportunity to be a part of the DEI team, and we would have like some people that would really push back, and they would say like, what's this Black National Anthem now, whatever. And I was like, actually that's existed. I would tell the story about how you would sing it in school. And I was like, it's actually not new. It's not something currently happening. And I feel like being able to bridge that in a non-aggressive way, but in more of an educational of like, I think we just have lived in a really predominantly white sheltered area that we don't have a lot of culture. That, you know, it seems shocking, when you hear about this, but it really isn't. This is normal, and it's most people's lives, that allowed me to, I think, shift some perspectives of just like, but, you know, the media just, I think, really wanted to play on the fact that, this is wokeness, after they hijack the word, but it's just really, I think the more I read and the more I dig into these books, because Adam, you named a bunch of fantastic authors, and I could list several as well. But I mean, like, I think one of my first ones was just Octavia Butler, and just Kindred, just in that. Have you ever read that, by the way?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's I
A
even have like the
lot of
graphic novels for it.
Octavia Butler, Tanana Reeve Jew, Toni
Mhm.
Yes.
Morrison. I think those are probably the people who have inspired me the most.
Well, the thing is like, I think the perspective of that book allowed me to say, okay, this is someone in the 70s, 80s that is living in this life, and then like she goes backwards in time to, she's living in like the 1800s, and then back and forth, and it just, I don't know, it was just very like, it will live in my brain and in my spirit and stuff. And so I think for authors like yourself of saying, okay, you've gone from what you've lived to journalism to now you're writing these stories. I think that your books are so important to read because who else has a POV like this that has the talent and the words to put together the lived experiences and everything that you've covered in journalism and then like put it into narrative format where we can learn and experience. And just like how you're saying, it's basically written in honor of your uncle for that. It's just, it must be such a, does it feel good? Is it heavy? What's the feeling like for that?
It's all of those things, I think. You guys have touched on some points that I think are central to my goals. One of them is about empathy. I taught both of my kids to read at a very, very early age. My daughter I taught to read at 3 and my son at 4.
That
And
is very young.
very young, they both would see me reading and they wanted to read and they were frustrated that they couldn't explore books the way that I do, and I would never give them screen time. I still don't give them very much screen time, and
Right.
so they have to read. That's
Yeah.
really what it comes down to, but the reason is because the reading, the books, the perspective creates that empathy within the
Absolutely.
reader. And you were saying earlier that when we were talking about Jimmy Kimmel and Charlie Kirk and the children of Israel and Gaza, about how some life is valued and some isn't, that it's by design. It is
Yeah.
by design that certain people are dehumanized. They are being dehumanized. We are being dehumanized on purpose. And the
Oh,
language is
yeah.
embedded in politics. It
Yeah.
is embedded in the media, and some of it is conscious and some of it is not.
Right.
The end result is that we are not seen as human.
Hmm.
And the counterpoint to that, the way to push back against that is through the arts, is
Yeah.
through the books specifically, which is why the books are under attack, which is why the
Yeah.
lesson plan in the curriculum in school is under attack, because
Yeah.
that's how you create empathy and connection between people of all backgrounds. That the way you do that is through
Yes.
the art, through the book.
It is.
It really is
It
that
is.
simple. And you will find so many people who have lived their early years in families that are either racist or ableist or homophobic or all of these other things. And the first time that they see a person of another perspective or get another perspective is when they go off to college. And college,
Absolutely. Oh my God.
right? And so you
I'm
get to
listen, you touched on this and clearly I'm like, so I had to write, it was like a 50-page paper or something. Do you remember that? It was like it was like, it was for my bachelor's, but it was for the class on policing. And I had to do this survey and it was so fascinating to me because I had to go through every system of the justice, right? From the time that you're talking to the first responders, to the officers, to arraignment, every part of the system. And I had to design a study and
Survey.
a survey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to interview everybody. And the amount of people that said like, no, there is no prejudice. There is no, everybody gets treated fairly. The common theme and the thing that I took away from it was they hadn't been to college. Everybody that had been to college could see these, we could talk about this stuff. It was um one of the biggest projects I think I'd ever worked on. And I got like 100% on it, whatever, probably went like way above. But I was so passionate about proving the fact that like it changes everything when you educate yourself and when you get exposed to different cultures and thoughts and really just put in your place. And it's just this, your myopia just, just, it goes, it leaves. Um, I think when I started studying a lot of like, practicing in like, like a youth advocates, I would compete for like competition and I did like um,
Model
United
UN?
Model UN and stuff. And I remember learning about Pakistan and India and like how they would put like the God, what is it when you're, the whole political machine when you're putting the my brain is like not working right now. When you're putting the language that she's talking about, you're into the books.
Propaganda.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. To deliberately propagandize and raise up a nation. And I was like
Mhm.
outraged. I mean, I'm 17 and I'm outraged and I'm like, America, would never. And now I'm realizing like that's what a political machine is.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really powerful. And like also just, I never thought that we had a caste system. Absolutely, we do.
Mhm.
100%. And like, in order for some people to always thrive, like there always has to be someone othered
Mhm.
and there's levels to that othering. And I think that's what books do is it levels the playing field and
It exposes those
it
things.
does
Yeah.
and it humanizes
Mhm.
people because we should be human, first is it. It's like, and that's why it's like you can live 1,000 lives if you take the time with books
Right.
to experience things that you never thought that you could, but you do now. And I just, I think that ever since I started applying myself to reading these things, like I feel like I already was obviously very interested in these things and majored in it, whatever, but it is a level of depth that I feel like I walk around with these stories as a part of me that I didn't have that perspective before. And I almost wish what things could I have done if I started reading
Mhm.
earlier and had these impacts? What if I was born somewhere else, like where you were, Adam, and
And that's why
had
they
exposures to those things? Because like, you know, there was like 3 people of color in the
yeah,
entire high
school.
school, 1 Jewish person, entire like
Mhm.
everybody else was white, and
Yeah.
like then I
And
look
it's
at
funny because where I come
I
from,
was like,
a
in your
Jewish
4th
person was white. You
yeah,
know? So
and in 4th grade, like you're the only white person in your class.
yeah.
And it just I
Well, and I think that goes back to the point, Tamika, that you were saying. It's like, and that's why books are under attack because
it
that's what
is.
it creates.
Well, I
It
wasn't ever gonna
creates
get the exposure otherwise.
right. It creates that when you don't have it in your day-to-day life, that you can take on another person's perspective as your own when you're immersed in that character. And so if you are only being immersed in characters that are exactly like you, how are you supposed to gain that? That's why I think it's so important that all people are given the marketing dollars by
Yeah,
publishers, that we market to marginalized people, that we market to BIPOC. I think it's important within horror that we continue to expand those voices. I think horror provides a freedom of tackling topics. It was to your point that you made earlier, and we don't have to necessarily shy away from it because people know when they come to it to expect something that's heavy and hard and dark and, frightening, but is probably going to tackle something
right.
or hold up a mirror to the things that we're afraid to look at within
Yeah,
ourselves and within our society. I think it's really good for doing that.
yeah.
Well, if you guys did you ever read Tender is the Flesh?
Yes.
Oh my
Not
goodness.
me. Adam did.
Yes.
Because I'm plant-based. I'm plant-based because I think there
If
was
you weren't before, you would be after that.
Yeah, like, I don't
there
think
was too much like rabbit hunting when I was growing up, but
Yes.
for people who don't know, it's about a virus that's made meat inedible. So humans have moved into the place of those animals, and cannibalism is industrialized, kind of in the way that we industrialize meat extraction now.
Right.
But I think the thing that when I was looking at it, that I sort of the lens of it was the backdrop of, everything that we're seeing now, disappearing of people, cracking down on free speech, on protests, weakening reproductive rights. I mean, there's so many things right now that I think that book held a mirror up to in our society, but it was so hard to get through it. But I think
yeah,
Yeah.
no. I got into The Lamb, what is it, Lucy Rose, The
Mm.
Lamb, like a third of the way through, and I had to DNF. I was so grossed out.
Well,
I couldn't. I realized I can't. The only one I read was Sunbathers with cannibalism vampires, and that was
yeah.
still tough.
Well, it's interesting though, when you say about Tinder is the flesh, the other thing that's really interesting in that book is, as it goes on, characters begin to question whether this virus ever really actually existed in the
Oh
first
my
place too,
god.
Yes!
right? So, like, the propaganda, it's like, was this just an excuse to get rid of these marginalized communities and do
Uh,
this? Yeah,
shit, I
We
might
can
have to
see
read
that
this one.
now, right? We can see
right.
Yeah.
that happening now with the deportations, right? That's why
Mm.
I was, oh my God. Like, that's what I love about it is that it can hold up a mirror and make you see things that, I think we become a bit numb, right? Because we have to in order to get through our day to day life. But when you read a book like this, especially when it's hard to get through it, you have an emotional reaction to the text. But I think that that emotional reaction that you have sort of burns the memory of the book in your brain because there's like
And
things
yeah,
I just cannot unsee.
right. And I think that the other thing that that book does, not to spoil anything, is it whatever the opposite of a catharsis is, that's how that book ends.
Exactly.
And it sort of makes you think, okay, this character is maybe developing that empathy, maybe like create, those things that we talk about when, you are exposed to other cultures or you read and that kind of thing. It sort of delivers that sort of hope that this might happen in this society and then says, oh, actually, and pulls the rug out. And
Right.
unfortunately, as you read that and it hurts really bad at first, but then you think that's probably the most likely reaction that would happen, right?
Right. Yes.
So yeah, such a brilliant book.
So I would like to also recommend, I just read this in the beginning of August, The Uproar by Kareem Demicheki. And it really challenges, like, it's a modern day. They have an immunocompromised daughter that's about to be born. They have to get rid of their dog. He's a social servant and they're trying to
A
just like,
social worker?
yes,
Oh, okay.
and he's trying to like, and basically, he's trying to do everything he possibly can to be this really good community member and help all these marginalized, underserved people. And his wife is a journalist, and they pride themselves on like they try to make less money and do all these things so that they can just like stay as close and like humble to like community causes, whatever. And they have this issue where the dog like is tied up, and this this kid that's supposed to be watching them says, hey, hey, he pushed me and he broke my arm, and he's like, and now like everyone's going against them, and it's like all these social campaigns, and it pits different like races against each other, and it really like goes through the ideas of like classism and privilege, and then also like the cultures against each other and how the police come in and take sides, and just it was fantastic. Like I can't, it really like plays it on like who you thought was right might not be right, and who you think is wrong might not be wrong, and how easily we can slip into stereotypes and
Oh, I love that.
who
I
gets
love
the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt. It
It's
was,
like when emotions get involved, it's
that's it.
so easy
Yes.
to suddenly all those sort of things that you think about yourself that you're, whatever it is,
That's
liberal or
exactly it.
understanding and all those
Yes.
things, that suddenly once you put emotion into it, you fall back into these things that you never thought you
Yeah.
would.
Yeah, and I just I loved it, and, I wanted to ask you, just because we were talking about language and propaganda, your thoughts on the Sydney Sweeney ad with the jeans, because I feel like right now, like, it's a movement of eugenics, and then, like, it comes out on top of, like, the Tylenol
Mhm.
conversation, just, like, recently of, like, "Yep, these people are good, these people aren't," so just if you had any thoughts on that.
I don't know what the Sydney Sweeney story is. What is that?
Let me inform you. I would love to tell you. So it's for American Eagle. Now Sydney Sweeney is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed
White woman.
white woman, perfect for like Aryan race, right? Of where eugenics were done in the past. And she gets on the ad for jeans and says, like, these are really good jeans. And good jeans have been passed down from years to years. And it's like this whole coded message of like what she's saying. And I mean, people are like, they're saying the quiet part
Yeah.
aloud.
Yep.
Like,
That these genes are better than other genes.
yeah. And like, that's what I had learned is that when it's a dog whistle. The one thing with the dog whistle is that the people that are supposed to be able to hear it, hear it. Okay. And if it's not for you, then you don't hear it. You misses it and it goes over your head. But the one thing with the dog whistle with coded language like that is there's always plausible deniability.
Mhm.
And it's like, it's just a gene ad. It's not that
Yeah.
deep. Why would you think we're trying to say that? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
I think the
but people have been sterilized for years, and women against their rights, even as like, I want to say it's the 40s or the 50s, in North Carolina, that they wouldn't let them reproduce. It's like, it's not that far and that long ago.
I think that the American form of racism very much parallels an abusive domestic relationship in the ways that marginalized people are gaslit, the way that we are, to go back to the point of dehumanization. But if you think of the archetype of an abusive man married to a woman that he's constantly emotionally or physically abusing, that is a smaller version of what we're experiencing nationally. So of course, the language is coded, right? Because the abuser is going to be able to go out and present themselves as if they are upstanding citizens, as if they are wonderful people. And of course, I would never, and of course, I don't see race. And of course, all of these things. But the person who is being victimized is always aware of the truth.
Right.
But truth is constantly being denied. And so in this case, who is is not even really coded language
Right.
anymore. Right? I mean, it's obvious that you're talking about genes, blue genes,
Mhm.
you're also talking about genetics.
Right.
And so
Yeah, that's what it is now. There's the
that
fear
language
repercussion or, having to try to make it as a dog whistle. You don't really have to, right? It's just like,
the language is
you'll
there
be
to
supported for
terrorize.
saying it.
The language is also there to terrorize. I think that
Mm.
that's the point that we have to remember about propaganda. It is propaganda in the sense that for the dominant culture, it is setting the agenda for them and telling them what to think. But for the person that is targeting,
Mhm.
it is the language of terror. It is terrorizing us. And so when we hear these things, we are meant to feel a certain way about it. It's like the abuser saying, wait till we get back home.
Ooh.
Right? So the language, even though it's, coded, the language is very violent and it is meant to harm. If you have a president who comes out and calls certain groups of people within the country certain things, thugs,
Mm.
criminals, and this isn't just our current president. We've been, we've been called thugs for
No.
generations, right?
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, think about the concept of the creation of the welfare
Yes,
Well,
welfare.
Reagan, but it was Democrat. I mean,
just
sure,
saying
yeah.
all the way back to there, like in sociology, we researched a
Mhm.
lot about like, the concept that they created this figure of the
Oh,
black
yeah.
welfare queen. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's actually not, I mean, I had my very first college class of sociology 100. The, the white teacher asked, he's like, who are the top people on?
Welfare?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's like, and the kids were like black people. And he's like, get out.
Yeah.
He like literally set them up to be like, he's like, it's freaking white women from
Yeah.
men like you that
Yeah.
leave them in terrible
Yeah.
positions. And I
Yeah.
was like, baby, I'm going to like this
Mhm.
class. Like, and I was so like proud that someone would, and I mean, talk about a learning experience right there that, that would never, you can't go back from that. Now
Mhm.
that's burning. But I mean,
And
that's
that's
how,
why
but that's why they,
colleges are being demonized and,
exactly. But, and
all
that's why
yeah.
there's a huge of like, well, it's such a waste of money,
Mm.
why go into a white collar job, go
Yeah.
into the blue and we're,
Mhm.
yeah. So I just think for what you're saying of like terrorizing, you create this figure of, the person that's taking advantage of all
Yeah.
these things, the lazy, all that, you create this monster that's taking advantage of you.
Yeah. I think this
Yeah, go.
makes me also think about, to go back to your work, I can't help but think about the story that opens your collection of The Turn, where essentially, dogs decide they don't want to be pets anymore, right?
Yeah.
And, I can't help but think, you know, kind of the tender as the flesh, a lot of those similar sort of things of like the assumptions that maybe the dominant or whatever you want to call it class, race, the assumptions that they're putting on everyone else to keep themselves in the positions that they're at are almost always based, incorrectly. The idea that if other people were to wake up and say this is not, in mass, that it would cause the chaos that you kind of create in that story.
And that story, it has gotten interesting reactions, I think because people are so in love with the ideas that they have projected onto their dogs in particular.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason why I wrote the story is because I think that it is very hard for people within the dominant culture where the entire culture is built around them to see perspectives outside of what they believe.
Right.
So if you believe that your dog loves you, then that means your dog loves you. There is no question about it. If you believe that your dog should be submissive to you, then that will be the case, and that it actually wants that and loves you back. And so I was playing with that idea of rising up because it set the tone for the collection. I think it sets the tone for most of my work where there's a character who has been traumatized in some way, and
Mhm.
they are coming to the realization that they have power and agency and can use that to free themselves from labels or free themselves from degradation, from abuse, whatever it is. But I don't like to write characters that are all one thing. And this goes back to the point that you were making earlier when you were talking about the uproar. And I said I love that is because I love characters who embody the hero and the villain.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love characters who in their subversive rising up maybe are making choices that the reader wouldn't necessarily agree with and be like, wait a minute, like I see what you're doing, but maybe we don't need to go that far. I think it set the tone for other stories to come, like the beauty queen, the model who was forced to pose as a mannequin behind the glass. Like they all kind of rise up. The one who was in an emotionally abusive relationship, but they all rose up in different ways. Some of them were
Mm.
more violent than others.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because we
I
all have
really would
weaknesses, you know?
love mhm. I would really love to hear your thoughts when you read it and the take on that. And one other recommendation would be the book, The Victim. This is coming from a Hispanic point of view of they're on a college campus and they're kind of being like there's been some mistreatment here and there. And he's a school journalist, young kid, and he's like, you know what, like maybe I'll just like some shit's happened to me, but like maybe I'll just right? That a few other things have happened to me because it's like helping me to like get views and like and when and it's an interesting take because he's like, who's it actually harming? You know, these things are out here really happening. No, it's not happening on my campus and it didn't happen exactly to me, but I'm gonna write about it and show that I'm the victim, but then it like kind of takes over his whole personality, but you can always like you can understand why they're that he's choosing to write about this, but also how like it's just when you say like villain and hero,
Mhm.
like I think that book just absolutely embodies that as well.
Oh, I gotta
Um
check that out. You said it was called The
Yeah.
Victim?
yeah, I'll get it up here from when I read that like last year.
Yeah.
It was just like I feel like it's these types of books that allow you to be like, well, damn, like I understand how you can end up in that situation.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, because going back to the turn, I feel like that main character reminds me a lot of the main character in Salamander Justice sometimes too, where like they don't like they're what is important to them, what they enjoy is not like 100% societally accepted. Like the way that they treat relationships, the fact that this main character does not like having pets, does not want to. It's very interesting to see these characters that kind of become othered simply because they don't fall into what, society has told you this is what a good life is. This is what you're expected
Mm,
to do. Yes, like the fact that she, that kind of brings into the idea of what a mother is supposed to be and how they're supposed to act. And when they don't, the way that they're villainized so quickly, the
yep.
way that these characters see relationships, where it's like they're almost, in Salamander Justice and in The Turn, her views towards relationships are much more traditionally masculine, in the sense of like, what is this relationship going to do for me? How do I feel? It's like, it's kind of a, I can take it or leave it, those kinds of things. And the way you play with that really creates this sort of, before the horrors even begin, it really brings in this sort of like the way society sees things and how it can be horrific to someone that doesn't fall in line uh, to what you're supposed to do and behave.
Yeah.
In
That's
Salamander Justice, it's interesting because the main character Vita, you wonder by the end whether or not she is the abused or the abuser.
yeah, right.
And I think in some of my other writing, in the case of Bridget Has Disappeared, when people are reading Yusuf's narrative,
Mhm.
and I mentioned this during the reading at StokerCon, people often think in the beginning that he's going to turn into an abuser and that
Right.
going to become so obsessed with knowing where Bridget is going when she
Mhm.
disappears that he's going to harm her. And I found that so interesting because Yusuf, as he's telling the story, sees himself as the victim very much
Right.
as Sam in Salamander Justice, the love interest,
Mhm.
the main character, or one of the love interests, I should say, of the main
Yeah.
character, sees himself as the victim as well.
Right.
And how the character's perspective on who they are could be so far away from what is societally accepted. And also just, the idea that they are a good person. That, we
Yeah.
all think we're a good person,
Wow.
right?
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like we could have, like,
Yeah.
another full hour of talking as you just touched on that
Because it's funny, yeah, with Sam, where it's like, okay, he's being abused while at the same time he's carrying out a full side relationship with this other person who thinks he loves her and that they're going to be together. And he's like, well, everybody knows that's not, anything that's going to go anywhere. It's like, I think she doesn't realize that guy.
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
it's amazing how many, I feel like I think I'm a good person. I'm making
Mm-hmm.
these choices because I'm a good person.
Mm.
And and it's like, if this happens to me, then I'm the victim. Just and when you're saying those words, it's like looking at yourself through that lens of, I don't want these things taken from me, where it's like there's other groups that have
Yeah.
so much less of freedoms and benefits of the doubt and, you name it, right? And they're like, yeah, but if this gets taken away from me, then that would be
That's a
wrong. And
tragedy.
that would be
Yeah.
really bad. And like, let's go back to the good old days when, I didn't have to worry about any of this stuff. And it's like, I was listening to someone the other day talking about, the whole concept of the black pilot and the DEI. And it's like, well, I mean, you have to think about it. They were saying, like, do you really want someone to be flying that? And I'm like, did you look at their test scores? Why do you just assume that because they're
Mm-hmm.
like, the whole reason for DEI is because unqualified what I mean, first of all, that we're confusing DEI with
Affirmative
affirmative
action.
action, but
Yeah.
it's because unqualified, lesser scored white people were getting jobs over people that of color and whatnot that were scoring higher is like if you wanted to take it from the affirmative action, like look at it, I guess is what I'm saying. But just the fact that they were like saying, well, yeah, you got to think about that. Like, do you really want someone that's underqualified to be flying you? And I'm like, why would you even think that? Like, why would you think simply
Where
because
not
they're a
in
female or they're
America.
black that that like what part of your brain actually lines this up? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why don't you immediately go to challenging? Like, because that's where my brain goes to like, well, what were their scores and what are you basing this off of? And
Mm-hmm. How
like,
many flights have
how
they
can
taken?
you
How can you, it's
generally
like, yeah.
like, and it's like if these flight instructors, then I started looking it up. It's like if these flight instructors pass these people, and they haven't done it, like, they lose their flight licenses
Mhm.
too. It's like there's a lot of checks and balances. It's just the same perpetuation of just shitting on people. But it's just like, and there's that concept of, I don't know if you ever seen that movie. It's like a lot older, but it's Something New is Sanaa Lathan. And
Yeah.
I love that movie. And she's talking about like, well, I got to pay the old black tax. And he's like, her white boyfriend's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I got to work twice as hard. I got to
Mhm.
do twice as many things because I'm a female, I'm black, I'm in a high powered, I'm trying to make partner. Like, I have to do everything fucking perfect in order to even be respected. And I just feel like that fucking sucks. And whether you're, any type of marginalization that, you're just not immediately given, that's like, if you're white cis male, it's just like, yeah, yeah, you could probably do the job.
It's assuming you
Yeah,
know what you're talking
yeah, you could
about
probably do it.
when you generally don't.
You know?
Who make assumptions, the people who make the assumptions very often are not aware of the assumptions that they are making. And it's hard to overcome that without the exposure to ideas and people and culture and books outside of one's lived experience. And I think that that's what we're seeing over and over again. Erica Badu, the singer, has a song.
Yes.
She says, "You don't have to believe everything you think." And I always bring this up because I think it's such a powerful message that we
Wow.
constantly have to be taking inventory of our thoughts.
Mm,
I mean, and this is for all of us. This isn't just for the
right.
culture, because I know within African American culture very much has an issue with the LGBTQIA community. I mean, if
Mhm.
we're just being real, a
Mhm.
lot of African American families tend to be very socially conservative and are home.
Right.
And so I think we always have to be taking inventory of our thoughts and what we're thinking and the assumptions that we make and challenge those. And it takes a certain level of high mindedness in order to be able to do that. It takes a certain mindset in order to be able to do that. And our culture is pushing back against that self scrutiny, that sort of self reflection, that, you know,
Mhm.
part our brain and saying to ourselves, what do you really think? And should you be? And
Yeah.
I think that's what books and specifically horror books can do for us, which is why I love writing in this genre so much.
Well, I hope that you will come back again and I wish that you don't happen to be a professor, do you?
No.
I really wish you were. Like, I would sign up for your class
Yeah.
immediately, or like, please, like, start a 6-week lecture course or
Mhm. I
something
feel like I'm a
because,
better person after having this
yeah,
conversation.
and
Like,
I just, honey, I don't get, no, I mean, it's just, there's so much to unpack and it's fantastic. And I feel like we could even like go through certain books and the ways that like, you know, it's just been a pleasure. It's been an
yeah.
absolute pleasure, and my emotions are everywhere. I
Yes.
feel enlightened and good. But yes, just to tie it up here real quick, it was Victim by Andrew Boryga, Boryga. It has a bunch of dominoes on the front, like it's gonna fall. But I think both of those were just such societally, like sociological based books of
Mm.
what you were describing that I would love to chat further with you on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be sure to read that and The Uproar before I return.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And so obviously, you have the two books that are out now that everyone should read, and I've put all over my Instagram and stories. The Curse of Hester Gardens comes out next year. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I need to
And
know
when it
more.
comes out, we've already pre-ordered it,
Yes.
so we're good to
You
go. But
have?
what can you tell
Oh,
the oh yeah,
this is
immediately as soon as possible.
fantastic. The book is
So
about
what can you tell our listeners about it and when it's coming out, all that stuff?
yes, it is a gothic novel set in a public housing
I'm
project.
done. I'm sold.
The main the main character is raising her sons in this project. It's an impoverished community, and she is facing the twin specters of a supernatural curse that she had a hand in creating, and also the specter of gun violence.
I can't wait.
I am so excited because I feel like it brings together so much of everything that I've been working on. For this
Oh
to
my god.
debut is just like chef's kiss.
Yes,
Well, please, please, please come back on before that launches. We want to hype it up,
absolutely.
and even if there's like an e-arc opportunity to pre-read it and
Hmm.
just get it
Yeah,
going,
I need
because
it last.
yeah, yesterday. I mean,
You to the ARC list for sure.
thank
Oh,
you.
yes.
I mean, you say gothic, I'm like, yes. And then you say, I'm like, yes. I mean, clearly, I think for some of the books I'm discussing, you can tell like that's my vein that
One of my favorite movies of all time is Candyman. You know,
I
it
did not see you going that direction. I'm
no,
sorry.
but
Okay.
like
I hear what you're saying. Go
okay.
on.
So Candyman, obviously, supernatural horror. A lot of it takes place in a housing project in
Hmm.
Chicago. But the thing is, like the writer, the director, a lot of the things, it's all coming from a white perspective. So to have, you writing this, I can't wait to see, the themes, the way that it's explored. I know from your writing now it's going to be incredible. And, it is definitely on the top of my anticipated reads for 2026 for
That
sure.
sounds like a Substack post of you should juxtapose Candyman with her book and what they got wrong and what she got
Well, that's
right.
why I love the remake, or whatever it is. It's like a sequel slash remake because I think that it does address some of those things. That yeah,
I thought the 2021 version definitely did. When I was in Chicago this summer, I actually went over to Cabrini Green area just to
amazing.
take some photos and just kind of get in the mood of everything as it related to the book. But
Hmm.
I talked to an author once about Candyman and about the real life horror that sort of existed in Cabrini Green. That sort of
Hmm.
backdrop to the film, the original film. And yes, there was a lot that was wrong, but I do look forward to having these conversations when the book comes out because I think that many people are going to make that connection.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, love it. Well, thank you so much.
Yes,
Can't wait to talk
abundantly.
again.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you have just a wonderful rest of your night here, and look forward to talking again soon.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thanks, Tamika. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.